What's going on, everyone? It is Fate from Individually here, and today in this video I do want to talk about generational astrology, specifically people born in 1995 like myself. So the question always raises, are we Generation Z or are we Millennials? Now the short answer is that we are the Millennials, which is actually the real thing, which I'll just show you right now. As you can see, that is on Wikipedia, it is a real thing. It just means that you're right on the cusp. But I do want to say that it's more complicated than actually giving a label, since some 95 babies feel more Gen Z and other people do feel more on the millennial spectrum. And I do want to talk about that today in this video, on how to answer this as clearly as possible. Now, I do not bullshit, I just get straight to the point. I am an Aries rising with Virgo and Mercury, as you can see in my chart. So I'm not going to bullshit, I'm going to get straight to the point and be as factual as I possibly can. Now, before we do get into the astrology of it all, I do want to show you with sociology. So, according to sociologists in Australia, this is a government website, sport.newsouthwales.gov.au. They end millennial in 1994, they start Generation Z in 1995, and it goes to 2009. So this is only, as you can see with the age ranges, this article is only roughly a year old, 15 to 29. We are turning 30 this year, so this is pretty much still recent. Now, of course, depending where you're born, the dates are going to be slightly different. Now, if you go to poor research, which I personally don't support, I do want to add a disclaimer that poor research did actually retire their definition. I want to make that very clear. They have retired their definition. The only reason I'm using it is because it's still a really popular one that people still go by. So they say that in the United States especially, it's 1997 to 2012. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, I have put this in, I'll get to this shortly. I'm just giving evidence that what I'm saying is factual. That's the only reason I've got these up. But I do want to talk about my chart since I'm born in 1995. So we're going to get right into it now. So yeah. So from January to around April-ish, Pluto did go into Sagittarius in 1995. I did a birth chart around, say, February, which I'll do right now. So if I went from February the 4th in 1995, and just put my city, just go Brisbane. Then I went OK. You will see that someone born in February of 1995 will have the Pluto in Sagittarius at the very 0 degree. But there was also a retrograde around April. Pluto did retrograde back into Scorpio, and it stayed there to November of 1995. So since I'm born in August, as you see Leo, so which is an August sign, sun sign. So since I'm born in August, after that retrograde, that puts me with Pluto Scorpio at 27 degrees. Now it's important to remember that even though they're technically different signs and it did retrograde back, it still carries mixed energies. Any planet that can retrograde does carry mixed energies when it's at the very end and after the post-retrograde part. Now it is something called a post-retrograde period, so it's after the retrograde has happened. Now people during the retrograde will also have mixed energies, it's just more turned inside, it's just turned inward basically. So as you can see that I actually do have my Uranus in Capricorn, which is another generational planet. Like in generational astrology we use Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. As you can see, it's retrograde. So that pretty much does put us 95 babies right on the cusp. Now when you do get into the late degrees will create something called an out of sign conjunction. That pretty much means that, for example, a Pluto in Scorpio at 27 degrees and a Pluto at Sagittarius at 0 degrees is still going to create a conjunction. That means the energies still flow really well between two people. So, like I said at the start of this video, it's not as simple as saying that all people with Pluto in Scorpio are part of the 1980 something generation. It does not work like that, and it never did work like that. Now, people do generally do that because it just simplifies things. It just makes things really simple. But one thing that does not get taken into account majority of the time is that the degrees actually do matter when it comes to things astrologically. especially when it comes to planets that do retrograde. Now, you can pretty much say that planets that do not retrograde, such as the Sun, the Moon, and the Ascendant, it would be more safe to say that once you are in those signs, you're pretty much are solidly those signs, because they do not retrograde. They're just one straight thing. It just goes straight for the sign into the next sign without any retrograde and going back into the other sign. So yeah, I hope that does make sense of what I'm trying to say, that when it comes to retrograde planets, it solidly does put them on the cusp. Now, all these planets will, even if they're in the late degrees, they will touch like for example, my Leo Sun will still create a out of sign conjunction with an early Virgo placement, you could say. So if someone has their Sun at the 0 degree Virgo, that will still create an out of sign conjunction. But since it's not retrograde, you're still part of, like, you're still solidly part of that. Now, that's not to say that you're not a Pluto in Scorpio. You definitely are a Pluto in Scorpio, which means you technically are half part of the Millennial generation, but since you are on the cusp, you're also part of Generation Z as well. So I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, put in the comments below, and I try to be a lot more clearer when I'm saying. But I hope that does make sense. Like me personally, I do connect with the older Gen Z more than the younger millennials in my personal opinion and based on my life. So everyone born at the very end of these degrees, I'm going to react to the energies differently. It's not as simple as saying that they're all millennials or they're all zoomers or whatever. It depends on the person and how they react to that late degree cusp energy. So in the short thing that you say, what am I? You're pretty much a combination of both, especially when the late degrees do have a lot to do with the early degrees of a sign. So another example, when Uranus is also in 27 degrees, that will also pretty much do an out of sign conjunction with the very early degree Uranus. So this, another thing I do want to say, that evidence of what I'm trying to say about the mixed energies. I will use Google Gemini. Now, I don't always recommend using AI for everything, but this is part of Google, so the information they give is going to be mostly factual. This is still part of Google, so I do trust this. So for evidence, I did ask that does my 27 degree post-retrograde Pluto have some Pluto-Sag energy. This does say cusp influence. Planets at the very end of a degree of a sign, usually within 3 to 5 degrees. Now, other astrologers do have slightly different opinions, but that's just a spectrum of what it mostly is. I often said that some characteristics of the next sign. This is because the energy is transitioning. Think of it like standing on the very edge of one room with the next room. Or you can also use like a border of a country, like between the American and Canadian border, you could use as another example. It's just a step away. You are going to feel the influences of both of the countries, you could say, or both of those rooms, of what the example is given here. You're still in the first room, so yes, you still are a Pluto and Scorpio. I'm not saying that you are not, or that I'm not. It's still pretty much in Scorpio. But you can still see and feel the atmosphere of the next room, or the next sign. So that's what that basically says. Now, I already knew this. I'm only bringing this up as evidence that what I'm saying is absolutely factual, and it will remain factual. So, a generational shift. Pluto is a slow-moving generational planet. Pluto in Scorpio roughly between 1983 to 1995, and Pluto in Sagittarius, which is 1995 to 2008, represents different collectively transformation. So, basically what it's saying, if you're born at the very end of Pluto and Scorpio era, you'll be experiencing the tail end of that Scorpio-phomic transformation, but you also at the very beginning sensing the shift towards Sagittarian themes, which is pretty much truth-seeking, expansion, and belief systems. Now, in predictive astrology, that 1995 babies did mostly grow up with Pluto being in Sagittarius, so that means that you did grow up with all of these type of things happen around you. So it's important to actually make that a factor. That we did, even though some of us may not have it physically in our chart as it being Pluto and Sagittarius, we did grow up with Pluto being in Sagittarius. So that means we did grow with a lot of Gen Z themes, and a lot of Gen Z things actually happen. So it's important to remember that in predictive astrology, we did grow up with that placement whether we have it in our chart or not. So it pretty much does say, to end this off, is in essence your Pluto Scorpio at the 27 degree, 27, 28 and 29 this can also apply to, suggests that your powerful journey of transformation, which is Scorpio, is likely infused with the crest for understanding meaning and expansion with Sagittarius. You're someone who not only dives deep, which is pretty accurate to me personally, but also seeks to make sense of what you find and potentially share with the world in some way. So, in short, basically after reading that, now before I do say my opinion and what this tells me, when it comes to astrology, I do not recommend to always use AI. Now I do use Gemini AI because it is from Google, and Google is mostly factual in how they do things. It's pretty much no different just Googling things, except you do have human-made websites instead. So this pretty much does say that whether you want to identify as being Generation Z, part of that generation, or you want to identify as being part of a Millennial, you as a 1995 baby can actually have a choice between the two. Or you can just call yourself as the Millennial. So after reading all this, I'm just going to say from an astrological standpoint, what are you? Well, you pretty much are a Millennial, which is pretty much the cusp between the two. But by culture and by astrologically with the degrees and stuff, and as astrology as a whole, you are a Millennial. That pretty much says that some may react to this energy and relate more to Gen Z, more like me personally. Or some may also react to this type of energy, astrological energy, and relate to millennials more. So it's always important, even with trends do react to energy very differently. And this is no different than when you're in the late degrees. Everyone's going to react to their own energy very differently. Astrology is not a personality test. It's pretty much just a bunch of energies that you can freely act out within a spectrum. There is a spectrum, since the signs and the degrees and everything does mean something, but the way someone does express it is on a spectrum. So I hope that does answer your question, that if you are born within like a retrograde period, you're pretty much on the Pluto cusp, and you can claim pretty much both if you want to. So that's pretty much all I want to say in this video based on my opinion as someone that's been studying astrology for 8 years. Now, how long you study astrology does not mean that you know more. I'm definitely not saying that either. But as someone that has studied astrology heavily and has researched this topic and has actually been pretty confused of what I am, this is just what I picked up in my personal opinion. So yeah, I'm going to end this video off now. Actually, before I do, I just want to revive one thing. So, especially when the late Pluto Scorpio does touch the early Pluto and Sag people within like the 5 degrees, that pretty much says that you are part of the Pluto and Sag generation still, but you are allowed to claim the early Pluto and Sagittarius generation too, in my opinion. It's pretty much up to you when you are within the retrograde period. So anyone born with any other cusp years, other cusp years I think would be between 2009 and 2012 within the generational planets. It's important to do your research, and if you are born on any late degrees plus retrograde period within that year, you are also on a cusp, if that does make sense. So yeah, I'm going to end this video off now. I'm just going to say that us 95 babies are the millennials, but you have every single right to claim Generation Z or Millennial, depending on your personal upbringing and how you are reacting to these astrological energies. So yeah, anyone that says that this means you're a millennial, they are absolutely bullshitting, and it's not true at all, especially when you are born within that retrograde period. Now, while it's true that most millennials do have this placement, when you're born on the cusp, the energy does get reacted a little bit differently than someone born 1994 and before. It's important to actually put the degrees there as well, and that will give you the final answer. So to answer the question, we are pretty much millennial Gen Z cusps, but you are still in the same generation of someone born in the early 2000s, and as someone born in the early 1900s as well, 1990s. So anyway, I'm going to end this video off now, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments below and I will answer them the best I can. Thanks again.